They watched from the sky, from miles above the jungle, from machines that never blinked. They believed nothing could hide from them. But down below, in a patchwork of rice paddies and flooded earth, one farmer learned how to disappear. Not by running, not by fighting, but by thinking slower and smarter than the men hunting him from the clouds. This is the story of the Vietnamese farmer who outsmarted U.S. reconnaissance aircraft. He was not a soldier. He carried no rank. He owned no radio, no map, no weapon worth naming. Yet for years, American pilots circled above his land, searching, photographing, recording, and never truly seeing him at all. Because the most dangerous enemy is the one who understands how you see the world and quietly learns how to lie to it. The Mekong Delta, early 1960s. A place where water and land argued constantly over who belonged where villages rose on stilts, where rice paddies reflected the sky like broken mirrors, and where life followed seasons older than any flag. This region fed South Vietnam. It also fed the war. Supply routes, hidden camps, local couriers, all threaded through farmland that looked peaceful from above, but was anything but neutral on the ground. For American commanders, the Delta posed a nightmare. Too flat for mountains, too wet for armor, too dense with civilians to bomb freely. So they turned to the sky. Reconnaissance aircraft became the eyes of the war. Slow-moving observation planes, high-flying photo recon jets, later unmanned drones and infrared scanners. They mapped fields, counted footpaths, tracked shadows, heat, movement. Anything that looked wrong, anything that broke the pattern, became a target. And that was the weakness. Because to spot the unusual, you must first believe you understand what normal looks like. The farmer's name was Ba Hung. He was born on that land, worked it since childhood, and could read the soil the way others read books. When the war came closer, it did not arrive with speeches. It arrived with helicopters chopping the sky, with flares burning the night white, with distant explosions that rattled bowls on the table. Ba Hung did not choose the war. The war chose his farm. At first, he did what most civilians did. He tried to stay invisible. But invisibility was becoming impossible. American reconnaissance flights began appearing daily. They flew predictable routes, slow enough to watch, high enough to feel untouchable. Ba Hung noticed them before he understood them. The shadows came first, long, sliding shapes crossing the paddies. Then the sound, a constant mechanical hum that never quite left. The village whispered rumors. They can see through trees. They can see at night. They know who supports whom. Some of it was fear. Some of it was true. Ba Hung watched carefully. He noticed that after certain flights, patrols arrived, sometimes days later, sometimes within hours, always to the same places. A bend in a path, a cluster of huts too close together, a patch of ground that looked disturbed. He began to understand. The planes were not watching people. They were watching patterns. Ba Hung had never studied aviation, but he understood farming, and farming is the study of patterns over time. Plant too early, you lose the crop. Water too late, it rots. He realized the Americans were doing the same thing, but from the sky. They believed farmers behaved a certain way. Fields flooded on schedule, paths stayed fixed, homes stayed where they were built. Anything else meant trouble. That insight saved his life, and many others. By 1964, the Viet Cong had begun using his area as a quiet transit zone. No permanent camps, no flags, just men passing through at night. using the dikes between paddies, moving supplies wrapped in cloth to keep them dry. Ba Hong did not ask questions. He did not need to. If the Americans found this route, the village would burn. So he did something small, something almost stupid, something no intelligence briefing would ever mention. He changed the land, slowly. He shifted a footpath by a few inches each week. Not enough to notice from the ground, but enough to blur it from the air. He flooded fields irregularly, breaking the neat rectangles pilots expected. When men passed through at night, Ba Hung walked the same paths at dawn, dragging tools, creating overlapping footprints, confusing direction and purpose. From above, nothing made sense anymore. The Recon photos showed movement, but no pattern. Heat signatures appeared, then vanished. Paths seemed to lead nowhere. Analysts argued, pilots filed reports marked uncertain, and uncertain targets were often delayed targets. Delay was survival. The Americans adapted, as they always did. New aircraft arrived, better cameras, infrared sensors designed to spot warm bodies under foliage. Ba Hung adapted too. He learned the plane's schedules, the way a farmer learns the rhythm of rain. On days when infrared flights were common, he burned small cooking fires in empty fields at dawn, then buried the coals. The ground stayed warm for hours. From the sky, it looked like people were everywhere, and nowhere important at all. He placed water jars in the sun, then moved them at night, creating false trails of heat. He stacked harvested rice in places no farmer would store it, then moved it again before patrols arrived. Every action whispered the same lie. This land is chaos. Nothing here matters. Recon pilots grew frustrated. They could see everything, yet understand nothing. One pilot would later say it felt like the ground was deliberately mocking them. By 1966, Ba Hung's area had been flagged repeatedly, but never confirmed. No single photograph showed enough evidence. No single sensor reading justified a strike. And every time troops went in, they found nothing but farmers, mud, and crops. The Americans called it a ghost zone. The Viet Cong called it safe. Ah Hung never knew how many lives his quiet sabotage saved. He only knew that the planes kept coming, and the village still stood. Then came the mistake. A new reconnaissance officer arrived, fresh from training, confident in technology, eager to prove himself. He ordered low-altitude flights. Closer, slower. This was dangerous, but effective. The planes began to see details, tool marks, freshly moved soil. One morning, Ba Hung heard the engine closer than ever before. He looked up, and for the first time saw the pilot's helmet through the canopy. The sky had found him. He had minutes, maybe less. He did not run. Instead, he did the unthinkable. He took apart his own farm. He knocked down fences, scattered tools, flooded a field still holding young rice. He made it look like disaster. From above, the plane saw destruction, not preparation. A farmer failing, not a network hiding. The pilot logged it as storm damage. The plane turned away. That night, Ba Hung sat in the dark, hands shaking, knowing the margin was shrinking. Technology was improving. The sky was learning. Part 1 ends here, with a farmer who has fooled the air war, for now. But the sky never stops watching, and soon it would learn how to ask better questions. The sky learned how to ask better questions, and when it did, Ba Hung understood something terrifying. The war was no longer just watching the land, it was learning from it. By late 1966, the reconnaissance flights changed again. They no longer circled lazily. They no longer followed predictable routes. They came at odd hours, before dawn, after sunset, sometimes high, sometimes so low the wind from their wings bent the rice. The Americans had stopped searching for patterns. They were hunting for disruption. And disruption was exactly what Ba Hung had been creating. The very tricks that once protected his village were now becoming fingerprints. The false heat trails, the moved rice stacks, the flooded fields at the wrong times. Taken alone, each meant nothing. Together, they formed a question the sky could not ignore. Why was this place never normal? Ba Hung felt it before he saw it. The patrols grew more aggressive. They returned faster. They stayed longer. Men with rifles walked his fields, poked the mud with sticks, watched his hands while he spoke. He answered slowly, calmly. A farmer talks about weather, about pests, about bad luck. He never mentioned planes. But at night, he could not sleep. The war had reached the edge of his thinking. The Viet Cong couriers noticed, too. They stopped passing through so often. They warned him quietly, "The Americans are close." Ba Hung knew the truth. His land was no longer invisible. It was suspicious, and suspicion was often enough to kill. The climax came without warning. One morning in early 1967, the sky did not hum, it roared. Multiple aircraft, fast, coordinated, angry. They did not circle, they marked. Smoke canisters fell into the paddies, hissing where they landed. Minutes later, helicopters appeared. This was not reconnaissance, this was confirmation. Ba Hung had minutes again, but this time there was no lie clever enough. The Americans had decided. Something was here, and they were going to tear the land open until it confessed. Ba Hung did the only thing left. He made himself ordinary, painfully ordinary. He sent his family away, not running, just walking, as if visiting relatives. He stayed behind. When the troops arrived, he was knee-deep in water, planting rice. Slow, methodical. He did not look up when the helicopter landed. A soldier shouted, another pointed. Ba Hung wiped his hands on his shirt and waited. They questioned him for hours about the paths, the fires, the moving tools. He answered everything with the same story. "I am a bad farmer. The weather is changing. The floods are wrong. I make mistakes." They searched his home, found nothing. They searched his fields, found nothing, because Ba Hung had already dismantled the roots. Weeks earlier, when he felt the sky tighten, he had quietly guided the network away. No dramatic warning, no hero's speech, just a few words at night. "Do not come here anymore." The soldiers grew frustrated. They had expected certainty. They found only mud. In the end, they burned part of his crop anyway. A message. But they did not kill him, because there was no proof, and proof was still required, at least for now. When they left, Ba Hung stood alone in a ruined field, watching smoke rise from food meant to feed his family. He had won, and he had lost. The sky had not caught him, but it had broken him. The war moved on. By 1968, the Tet Offensive changed everything. The air filled with more aircraft than ever before. The ground shook constantly. Ba Hung's village was no longer strategic. It was just another place in the way. Reconnaissance became less subtle. Bombing became less selective. Technology had caught up with patience. Ba Hung survived by becoming irrelevant. He stopped manipulating the land, stopped outsmarting the sky. He farmed poorly, exactly as he had claimed. After the war, there were no medals, no recognition, no official record of what he had done. He rebuilt his field slowly, with hands that had learned to deceive satellites and pilots, now returning to honest soil. Years later, American analysts would review reconnaissance failures in Vietnam. They would speak of false positives, of misread terrain, of farmers whose behavior confused algorithms and human eyes alike. Ba Hung would never read those reports, but his legacy lived inside them. He proved something no weapon could erase, that intelligence, no matter how advanced, still relies on assumptions, and assumptions can be farmed. The Vietnamese farmer who outsmarted U.S. reconnaissance aircraft did not do it with secrecy alone. He did it by understanding how power looks at the world and gently teaching it the wrong lesson. He did not defeat the sky. He exhausted it. And sometimes that is enough.